Hello everybody, I would like to start this video off with the disclaimer. That is, this video contains mature themes and coarse subject. Viewer discretion is advised. And I say that because I'm going to talk about controversy and conspiracy, and well, it's definitely that of a mature theme. And well, coarse language, I'm sure most of you understand what that is. And I got a lot to go over. I'm going to start off with the financial reform bill, but I'm going to talk a lot about the Federal Reserve, conspiracies going back from World War I up until today. And we'll start this off with the reform bill, which passed today through vote. The vote was pretty much 2-1. And the reason why we need this reform bill, at least from the research that I have done, is to ensure that we don't have a financial crisis like we did in 2008. Remember when the banks were they were falling. They needed help from TARP and all this bailout money. But in reality, it's not going to work. And that is because they're not fixing the root of the problem. And that is based on our currency and debt. Debt which is guaranteed. I'll talk more about that as we go through this video. And the vote was 60-39. So a 3-2 ratio more than anything. And you never got to vote in this. No, there was 99 people out of 300 million Americans that got their say. So if you talk about us having freedom, we might have some freedom and maybe even more freedoms, that's debatable. But when we can't decide key elements, whether we want to go to war, so many things like that, no, not really. And I was reading an article about the reform bill today, and it stated, according to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, the legislation is aimed to preventing taxpayer-funded rescue of the financial industry in the future. Now, if you look at how this article is written, they want to make it sound like it's very, very good, and taxpayers, well, they're not going to get nailed from all of this, but in reality, you will get nailed from it both directly and indirectly, because you get nailed through debt. So directly, your own personal debt that you got, whether it be through your credit cards, your mortgage, and the indirect debt is the taxes you are already paying on, thus the national debt. Because even if they were hypothetically not to borrow any more money, you still got to pay off all of that extra debt. And they also said that it cracks down on bad gambles that the banks make. And we'll just have to wait and see about that. It says on here that it seeks to add an all-new regulator housed under the Fed, which focuses on consumer loans, aka credit cards and mortgages. Now, I'm not too sure on this whole regulations or what the regulations happen to be. But do you really think that it's needed? Because in reality, we do need to end the Fed, the Federal Reserve System, which controls the monetary system, which is a monopoly through the United States. And in reality, all countries and regions' central banks can have a monopoly on the money system. And it's not like the system that does all of these illegal issues are going to do it because they are in control from the Federal Reserve. And if you're not familiar with the Federal Reserve, they began back in 1913, roughly around Christmas time. The president then, Woodrow Wilson, took campaign money from the bankers, from the global elite bankers, to ensure that he would get elected. Thus we notice now that the Fed comes in. And the 1907 panic, which started with rumors about banks not having money, well, it cascaded into a bank run. The domino effect happened, and thus that's what set up the Federal Reserve. And they said they wanted to bring in the Federal Reserve so that they could contain inflation, aka trying to contain price stability. Sort of like the reform bill was to contain this whole financial collapse from ever happening. And if you look back in the last century, inflation, it's so evident. About a century ago, 80 years ago for that matter, 90, people, teachers, engineers, so many different occupations made $3, $4, $5 a day. Today, with $3, you might get yourself an order of fries and a soft drink at McDonald's, and that is a maybe, big maybe. And the Federal Reserve is about banking. Like I said, they monopolize the whole system like we do today. And in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, they confiscated gold. Pretty much stating, you got to give us your gold by this certain date. They would pay you the market value for gold. And if you don't do it afterwards, it would be thus illegal to have it afterwards. That scared a lot of people. People sold their gold. After that happened, the price shot up big time. So today people are stating, well, is there going to be any gold confiscation? It's already being done, and it's being done through debt. And yes, there could be a lot of people who are buying gold and silver today, and the debt crisis comes in and they're saying, hey, you owe us this much money that you don't got. Give us your gold, give us your silver, which might be one of the reasons why they're trying to hold the price of it down right now. And even the debt itself, if you're buying gold and silver, if you look at what you're paying through your mortgage and all this other debt, that stops you from being able to get as much gold. And really, that's all about wealth, gold and silver. And the taxes and the debt in itself is taking your wealth away. So to state, will they confiscate gold? Well, they're confiscating your wealth as we speak. And Gerald Celente has made a quote before that there's the greatest bank robbery going on right now, and it is the banks that are doing the robbing. And they do a lot of it through war, because it's large profits. They fund both sides of the war, and a bunch of people get killed, and the bankers make all this money. And in 1915, 1914, I don't know what year this was said, Colonial House and Edward Grey, these are powers that were sort of like the powers that be today. Mr. Grey said, what would American do if Germans sank an ocean liner with American passengers on board? And House said, I believe that a flame of indignation would sweep the United States, and that by itself would be sufficient to carry us into war. And apparently, this is documented. This is information from the Zeitgeist series. And on May the 7th, 1915, the Lusitania was sunk because it was in the German waters. Thus, the war began. Not only that one, but you have Pearl Harbor, which brought us into World War II. The Gulf of Tonkin, which brought us into Vietnam, and they then later stated that that accident was a mistake. It never happened. So you keep on getting all of these same stories over and over and over again. In 1960s, they took the coins, the coins we have, the dimes, the quarters, and all that stuff, and they took the silver away from the coins, thus reducing the value. But not only that, but they officially went off the gold standard, although it really was done about 80 years ago. So now we're back to these stage events, and we got 9/11. 9/11 to set up the Afghanistan and the Iraq war. And was 9/11 an inside job or that of a conspiracy? Well, obviously it was. I'll explain quickly momentarily, but first, if someone is labeled as a 9/11 truther, they're labeled as crazies, the nut jobs, even unpatriotic. Rosie O'Donnell, who is a 9/11 truther, as they call it, was on The View, and she was quoted as being a terrible accusation for stating that the government could do such a thing. And they say that it's not patriotic to say this type of stuff. And if that's the case, then I don't want to be patriotic, because that means you got to believe what they say and just be enslaved to them, literally. And patriotic to me is that of finding out the truth, the information for yourself, and then making the best possible judgments and the best possible decisions for yourself and your nation. And many people, when they're confronted with 911 troopers, they have a hard time handling this information. Hard time. And it's because they are not able to see, well, why would they do it? Why would they do it? Well, the why really isn't all that relevant. And it is relevant. Because if you got the information, the evidence that it is done, then the whys can come later, and you get the evidence for the whys. And I'm not going to really go over the whys, but very quickly, the how it was done. Because 911 has been proven to me to be an inside job. I don't believe it, I know it. Because believing is something that you think is something, but you're not entirely sure. I am entirely sure now of what's going on with 911. Now, I'm not a judge, but you think any sane judge that knows what they're doing could take the information from the plaintiff and the defendant and come up with a proper conviction. So now let's go over the quick facts for what happened. 1, you got the architects and engineers for 911 truth. These are a whack of different people for different people with classes of information, and they have worked together and found a lot of great information. These are respected people within our scientific community that have a lot of smarts within them. Number 2, the security of defense. What, you're not gonna take these planes down before they go into the buildings? Yes, there's passengers on the plane that are going to be taken down, but they're going to anyway, and the destruction would be less. But no, and they state the Americans have the greatest defense. So now if you want to know why this whole system from the economic powers that be is bullshit, I'm pretty much telling you why. And then the next one, buildings are falling at free fall speed. The temperatures needed to burn the steel, it's not even possible. At least that's what the architects and engineers are saying. But hey, what do they know? Oh man. And if you look at the economic side, you had shares of airline stocks being manipulated beforehand. A lot of puts, meaning bets that they would fall right before the incident took place. World Trade Center, the World Trade Center 7, not only was it not hit by a building, but it fell at free fall gravity vacuum air speed. And then if you can give me comments, well, it could be possible because of this, or that. Well, good luck with that, but not only good luck with that, but how does BBC have this information well over 20 minutes before it happened? Jane Stanley, a reporter, was talking about, yeah, the building's down, yet it was over her shoulder. They had a timestamp that said 21:54 time. Let's do some math. 12 means 12 o'clock, 21 subtract 12 is 9, which meant it happened at 9:54 London time. There's a 5-hour difference from London and New York, which means at 4:54, they were saying it collapsed, and it actually collapsed at 5:20. Now the scary part about this one is this really shows us that the mainstream media is controlled by those powers that be. It's not evidence, it's proof when they show a timestamp on BBC with the actual building above the reporter's head. And then when you ask Bush about what happens, he talks about where he was in Florida that day, mentioning that, well, obviously a television set was on. Really? A television set was on at the school. And you seen the first plane go in, oh, I thought it was pilot error. Yeah, you would think that. I don't think so. And not only that, but you get the old question about, oh, it's time for politics. It's an absurd insinuation. And if you're looking for tells, that's tells for beginners. Beginners. It's so obvious. So obvious. And then you get the defendants who are stating, Obama, for example, let us be clear. Al-Qaeda killed nearly 3,000 people that day. Clinton, 911 was not an inside job. It was an Osama bin Laden job. Bush, let us not tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks on September 11th, malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame from the terrorists themselves away from the guilty. But in reality, I actually like that line, because it says, let us not tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the 9/11 events. See, their story is outrageous. It's totally outrageous to think that the things that they mentioned could have happened. To me, that's outrageous. And then they say, malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame from the terrorists themselves, which is exactly what they are doing. Exactly. So, look at the justice system, we have the plaintiff that are saying the stuff that I said about the planes, or the way that the planes were not taken out, how the buildings fell, how the BBC reported this early, and you can go on with like pages and pages of info, and yet the defendants are saying, well, it was an Osama bin Laden job. I mean, it's pretty easy to say who's winning that debate. Yeah. So, right now, we spent more money investigating how many blowjobs that Bill Clinton had, and everything else with Monica Lewinsky than we have investigating the 9/11 attacks. Can you see bullshit here? Can you see fraud? It's just so clear. It's insane, insane, insane. And now we move to today. We have an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Given the track record that the powers that be have, well, what's your opinion on this? Because like 911, with the shares of stocks being manipulated beforehand, the same was the case here within Goldman Sachs. Tony Hayward selling BP shares before it happened, and it just collapsed huge. To me, it just seems like a no-brainer. And today, we are told from these people, these same people, that the cap has been placed on, everything's fine. And when I look at 911 again, I see, well, A, they are capable of doing what it is that they are doing, meaning do aggressive, horrible things along with malicious lies. But on the positive note is, they make it so easy for us to figure it out. So if it's easy enough to figure out 911, then anything else they do is probably going to be just as easy to figure out. And with this whole cap thing today, BP shares rose as much as 6.5% in the last half hour of trading. And it's now up about 44% in a little over 2 weeks. Now it's still down about 36% in the last couple months or so. But what's very interesting is options expiration. And if you're not familiar with stocks, that means that by the end of this Friday coming, that means the game for trying to make money for this period is over. It's hard to explain very quickly, but it's this Friday, and as we speak, we had this big gain right beforehand. And a lot of the stuff that seems that they do is manipulative within the stock market, which is yet another different subject that I'm really not going to get into on this particular video, except for this case here. And what they like to do is try to make it so that less people make as much money, yet as they themselves, the powers that be, can make as much. So I'd be kind of wondering how much was put into BP call options, noting that the closer you are from expiry, the more profitable it can be for having big rises or big spikes to the downside. Not only that, but we as a people are told to hate oil companies, and that BP's this evil company, so they know that regular people are going to be shorting it or putting puts, which is pretty much the same thing. So what do they do to stop them from making profits? They bring up the price right before options expiration. Now, I'm not saying that was the case, but like I said again, let's just look at the track record. So I kind of think, would the Fed or bankers have anything to do with this oil spill? Anyway, And recently we had a G20 summit meeting in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And people have had it for these reasons that I said here, just to name a few. And the meeting, of course, was very, very secretive. And the police officers whom were there to serve and protect the powers that be were arresting and being very violent with those of peaceful protesters. Like, how sane is this bullshit world when stuff like this is actually going on? I mean, these are the same people who have guaranteed debt, which is proven. They have done the attacks on 911. That is proven. And yet the peaceful protesters get beaten and arrested as badly as they did. And I wish I could give you better strategies for how to make these changes, because it's not easy. The whole 911 proof, if you will, it's not like it just happened this year or even last year or even 2008. It's been really going on from 2006, 2007 time frames. Yet more and more people are cluing in, which is the good thing. So I guess the best strategies I can give you is, one, stay informed, which I think is very, very important, and boycott the banking system to the best of your abilities, which means if you can take the entire bank account completely out and close it, that's amazing. I know that's very hard to do. That means not getting yourself in as much debt, not refusing to use credit cards. That means withdrawing your money when you need it, leaving whatever minimum you may need for payments and such. And like I say, keep yourself informed. Thank you for watching. Have yourself a great day. Bye-bye.